That's the thing. We kind of joked around about it yesterday. Like, what could we do for a true perspective trip? Should we just like make fun of the U.S. on all their historic, ownings in Vietnam or elsewhere? There's been a number of them. What I think it would be good to do is to actually take this shit seriously and actually respect some real troops. The question is in our society is like, we seem to kind of pick and choose which troops we respect and which troops we don't respect, don't we? Have you done your Twitter self-promo tweet yet? No, I haven't, and I will soon. I guess I just wanted to wait a minute to get started so I don't have people coming in here while I fucking eat a sandwich and stuff. I have something really special for us to look at today, though. It's a little documentary, and I saw the Alberta Advantage folks were looking at this last night, which is what gave me the idea to do it. This is a National Film Board documentary that I have to watch today. It's called Los Canadienses. And this is a film which profiles the brave Canadians who fought in the Spanish Civil War between 1936 and 1939 to save Spain's constitutionally elected government from the threat of a fascist dictatorship, which eventually prevailed. Over 40,000 volunteers from around the world fought in Spain. 1,200 of those were the Canadians of the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion. More than half of them never returned. This respectful, emotional, and historically rich film is committed to the memory of those who truly believed in the cause of the Spanish Republic. One really disgusting thing that I think has happened over the last couple of decades is we've taken these troops. World War II is the primary historical vector of this, right? We've taken these troops who very bravely did indeed go and fight fascism in Europe and fought the Nazis correctly. We can talk about the way that our governments were trying to avoid that, the way that William Lyon Mackenzie King in Canada was a supporter of Hitler. Our governments were pretty supportive of the Nazi project until it started going west. And we can and should talk about the ways that our governments were complicit in that. But what is undeniable is that in World War II, many Canadian and American, eventually when America finally joined up, many young people really did go and give their lives very bravely to fight fascism. And this part of it, the pre-Civil War, in the Spanish Civil War, I think is kind of extra amazing because these troops, we talk about poppy discourse. We wear the poppy to honor our World War I troops, essentially, whose deaths were basically meaningless, right? They were basically meaningless. It was just fought a complete nonsense war, dying in these horrible, miserable conditions in trench warfare, on behalf of, these fucking inbred oligarchs. This was before Outrun, because this was before World War II, and that whole project was after World War II. And so that's the thing. I think when we talk about respecting our troops, we forget about these folks. Again, this is 1,200 Canadians that went to fight fascism before our government even wanted them to. Again, and this comes up in that Bethune movie. Bethune was there in the Spanish Civil War, helping to fight fascism. He was advocating for a special kind of ambulance that could be used in this war. Other famous figures were there, Ernest Hemingway. And in fact, Ernest Hemingway wrote my favorite book of all time, For Whom the Bell Tolls, about this period, which is it's funny because he's become this some kind of problematic, if a guy likes Ernest Hemingway, it's one of these problematic authors. Beautiful, incredible book about someone that goes and fights and dies for people that he doesn't even know in a country where he doesn't live.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Holy shit. King Uendo, my goodness. Gifting 10 subs. Oh my gosh, King Uendo, thank you so much. Ridiculous. Fucking outrageous. King Uendo. My gosh. Extremely poggers. This is the kind of ironic thing, though, that I wanted to talk about. Which is that, first of all, yeah, we forget about these Canadian boys that went to go and fight in Spain. Fight fascism in Spain before the war even started. You know? Who saw what was coming and went and, you know, put their lives on the line to defend the Spanish Republic, to fight against fascism before it was.
You can count on me.
Before it was popular to do so.
Rob to talk you through all this.
Holy Lord, King Uendo. What can we even say about King Uendo? Thank you so much, King Uendo. Jesus Christ. We love our viewers. We love our viewers and chatters with actual jobs, don't we? You know, I love my fake job here on Twitch. I do love my fake job here on Twitch, but we definitely love our chatters with actual jobs. We love our Connor cosplayers, don't we, folks? Hemingway might have saved my life literally due to reading about his death. I was about to do some drastic medical stuff, and his case made me reverse path. He might be a dude bro author, according to some. His whole family's had a profound effect on me, including the acting granddaughters. Yeah, it had a huge, profound impact on me as well, O'Dane. Again, that book, if anyone has never read For Whom the Bell Tolls, it is, it's really something else. It's an incredible achievement, honestly. But talking about these Canadian boys that went to fight fascism in Spain, and the Canadian boys that fought and died fighting the Nazis. Something that's very kind of ironic is that I think the people that talk about respecting the troops the most, you know, the kind of reactionaries and liberals in our society that go on and on about this kind of sacrifice that they gave. In my view, you know, these boys who did put their lives on the line and fight and die to fight the scourge of fascism, their memories, in my opinion, have been kind of perverted. Because this incredibly heroic sacrifice, now is used to justify all kinds of things which they were specifically fighting against. We've talked about endlessly on this stream the ways that the Canadian government and the US government, since World War II,
you've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my gosh. This is outrageous. Adobe Cult, thank you so much for gifting 5 subs. Incredible. You know, we've talked about the ways, though, that the Canadian government and the US government has spent the last 50, 60, 70 years, the post-war period, engaging in a lot of the same fascism that these boys and girls, you know, it was predominantly boys, but girls as well. Girls, I mean, essential part of the war effort as well, both abroad and at home. Don't want to discount that. But in my view, it's ironically, it's the ultimate act of disrespect is to take this sacrifice, this very heroic, noble sacrifice that millions of people made in this time, and use their memories to, like, justify an ongoing regime of neocolonialism, genocide, murder, theft. That's the really disgusting thing that I think what our governments have engaged in the post-war period. And we talk about the ways that World War II, it's become this central building block of Western propaganda. And it's been used to justify the whole last generation of activity under the stance that we're the good guys. We fought fascism, we beat fascism, and now we're the good guys, we're the defenders of democracy, we're the keepers of the rules-based international order. And as we know from watching this channel, we know none of that is true. We know that ideologically, the Nazi project was basically continued, unabated. It mostly took place in the third world instead of in Western Europe. And the very heroic sacrifice that these soldiers made, I think, has been perverted. And it's been used by these horrible monsters to justify all kinds of very serious crimes. But I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that, like, this sacrifice did if you take away what the government was doing, what the elites were doing, what the capitalists were doing, the arms manufacturers, on an individual basis, it was incredibly brave and incredibly heroic what these soldiers did in World War II. And what I wanted to focus on today was these Canadians that went to fight in the Spanish Civil War, that saw the threat of fascism for what it was, that didn't even need to be told to go. Or in fact, our government didn't even want them to go. Our government did not even want these soldiers to go to Spain, and in fact, eventually made it illegal for people to go and volunteer in the Spanish Civil War. Doesn't Parenti argue that they only really got involved to prevent the Soviets from taking over Europe and making it communist? The way that our governments thought things were going to go before the war is that they thought the Nazi project was great because they were going to defeat the communists and didn't want to get involved in the first place. And then as soon as the Nazis moved west and started threatening the old power, the old colonialist power of the UK, that's when our governments decided to intervene. But immediately following World War II, I mean, they were ideologically opposed to the Soviet Union prior to World War II. That's why they encouraged Hitler to do what he did. That's why they supported him. Immediately following World War II, in which, countless millions of Soviet citizens died defeating the Nazis, immediately afterward, immediately shifted to this violent anti-communist foreign policy. And this effort to install global capitalism at gunpoint all throughout the developing world. We've talked endlessly about the developing world, these anti-colonial movements after World War II, oftentimes based in kind of in social solidarity, in anti-colonial nationalism, third world nationalism. These beautiful movements, these anti-colonial movements that started growing after World War II, and the United States used the memories of all the soldiers that fought and died in World War II, and used that as justification to ruthlessly crush all these movements throughout the world after World War II, which is, in my view, it's the ultimate form of disrespect. As much as these people talk about respecting the troops and these kind of like military nationalists, it's the ultimate form of act of disrespect to take this very real sacrifice and do what they did with it. Like we've talked about endlessly in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, all these places in Central and South America, in Southeast Asia, where they're like doing civil wars, in Korea, all in the name of anti-communism. And when you understand the idea of anti-communism is just another way of saying fascism, it becomes even a lot more clear. They spent the whole post-World War II period taking this very real sacrifice, this real heroic sacrifice, using that as a propaganda weapon, basically, to completely dominate the whole rest of the global south, the developing world, at gunpoint, to murder countless people, innocent people, promoting regimes of like torturers and murderers and people, military coups. That to me is sick. It's sick that that's what our governments have been engaging in over the last few decades. And it's the ultimate form of disrespect to the troops that did die in World War II. That's what their sacrifice meant, right? It only led to the United States and its lackeys in this kind of global crime, organized crime syndicate such as Canada, to fully grip the entire world in fascism, especially the developing world. So I would like to watch this documentary. This documentary is from 1975. It's available for free on the National Film Board. Anyone can watch it. And we're supposed to be respecting the troops today, and that's, I thought, a good way to do it. Let's actually pay respects to some troops that do deserve it. They deserve to be remembered. These Canadian soldiers that went and fought in this war, they've literally kind of been forgotten by history, as much as we venerate our World War II soldiers who fought fascism. These Canadians, they literally broke the law. They literally, like, with no support from the government, just out of a sense of purpose, went to fight fascism in Spain and died for it in some cases. Being anti the country that was the number one Nazi killer does kind of give the game away. It's just, Red Scary, what gives the game away as well is just when you ever hear these guys describing how once you just ensure that, your enemy is a communist, and you have this better dead than red mentality, that's how you justify an army going and killing women and children and villagers, farmers. And as we talked about in Nicaragua, it's not that every single Sandinista was a communist. There was communist elements in these things, certainly. But it became a way of just dehumanizing everyone, dehumanizing people to the extent that you could just butcher people en masse. Spend decades doing this. Can you talk a bit about the current Nicaraguan government? Well, I spent most of Monday talking about that. We talked about the Sandinista revolution and just how a lot of the so-called authoritarian things that we're hearing from that the Nicaraguan government does now under Ortega is being done in reaction to provocations by Western governments that have been meddling in their affairs for decades. Including, funding the Contras who massacred women and children and villagers and all this kind of nasty stuff. The VOD is actually on YouTube. If you go in the Discord, I posted it in the Discord. You can find it there. Okay. So this is a film again. So we are gonna actually respect the troops today. Unironically, this is an unironic troop respecting stream. This film is called Los Canadienses, and it's about the very brave Canadian troops that traveled to Spain between 36 and 39 to fight fascism in the Spanish Civil War. Let's go.
Well, that's a hard question to answer, how I remember it. I remember it as a very dedicated bunch of people. That is, you're talking about the volunteers who made a noble effort and were willing to give up their lives as they did. Half of them that left Canada never came back.
Between 1936 and 1938, more than 1,200 Canadians went to Spain to fight against fascism. They fought as members of a unique army made up of 40,000 volunteers from 27 countries, the legendary International Brigades. Their deeds and motives were praised by some and slandered by others. In a more tolerant age, they may come to be remembered as the last idealists of the 20th century. Yet their idealism was deeply rooted in the reality of the times.
It wasn't that I felt I'm going to change the world. We're going to make a different system throughout the world. It was a matter of stopping the advance of fascism.
Some of the things that you do, you're very sorry
Sure,
for.
Orbelder,
But
one sec.
This was one of the causes. I don't think anybody that went there was sorry.
I make no apologies for going to Spain to any living human being. I do not make those apologies, no.
No. Oh,
Hell yeah.
No way. Oh, no.
I love
That
these
has
guys.
been part of my life. I base all my thinking today and my dealing with people today on my experience there. I mean, what you learn when you're young stays with you.
I think it was one of the nicest, unselfish things I ever did in my life.
Doing it all over again, I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Quando la notte la sete riposa nel...
Okay, so someone mentioned that I should tweet that I'm live, and I am going to do that. Yep.
La campagna nella mia città, più non la turba la tema.
Machinists, teachers, lumberjacks, poets.
Che la guardia rossa, che marcia la riscossa, e scuoterà la forza, la schiava umanità.
Their cause, Republican Spain, went down in defeat. In all, nearly 1 million people lost their lives. The surviving soldiers of the International Brigades went home to be ignored or persecuted. For the thousands of volunteers in the Spanish earth, there are no monuments.
No monuments. And remember, what were you just saying? Who do we have monuments to? Who do we have monuments to in Canada? We should have monuments to this group. The MacKenzie Papineau Battalion. Where's the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion monument? Well, it doesn't exist. We have fascist monuments. We have monuments to Ukrainian SS divisions. We have the Victims of Communism monument that we're building right now at great taxpayer expense. You know, these monuments can tell you a story about what the priorities that your society has. Why have we forgotten these troops, and why do we respect other troops? And I frankly, I just think it's disgusting the way that we do this poppy shit every year, and we pretend that we respect the troops. We pretend that we respect the brave troops that went and fought and died, but it's not. We don't. We disgrace the memory of every single soldier that fought against fascism in World War II every day, because we took their sacrifice and we used that to spread evil and darkness around the planet. That's the reality. That's the ultimate form of disrespect. People should talk about how the supposedly anti-fascist USA was absolutely fine with Franco and the Spanish fascist regime, which, unlike the German and Italian ones, was not destroyed. The USA even used fascist Spain to smuggle Nazis out of Europe and later supported fascist Spain that was fanatically anti-left. I mean, listen to Comrade Social Distancing. We talked about Stephen and my beefs with Stephen as well. We talked about Kyle Rittenhouse. That was our initial beef, and about the U.S. Nazi alliance, which you're describing very accurately. Another way that this guy is, supports fascism despite proclaiming himself to be a liberal. Stephen, Logic Master Stephen, the Omni Nerd. It's funny how you never hear about this war. Wonder why a big European war in the 1900s fighting fascism just never gets talked about. It is interesting, isn't it? It is interesting, isn't it? Seriously, people have to read For Whom the Bell Tolls. Great movie as well. Great movie with, I believe, Gary Cooper and Ingrid Bergman are in that. Really great movie. In fact, if someone wanted to make that movie today, it's instant Oscar. Instant Oscar if someone makes a good film version of that today. It's a beautiful story, beautiful book. Not to be extra or whatever, but I've never seen a monument and thought, thank God that's there. Well, I think part of the reason for that, though, is all our monuments are in service of these horrible things. I think it would be good in society to build monuments to people that you actually respect and admire. To remind people about what your society's values are. It's just a lot of the people that we build monuments to are all fucking colonizers and genocidal murderers. Or we build monuments to World War II soldiers who, again, died completely in vain because immediately after World War II, our government immediately pivoted right into a fascist global takeover along with the United States. And keeping events within the national consciousness. It's another good point. We've forgotten about this group. We've forgotten about these soldiers. And we shouldn't forget. I think there's something really beautiful about this. These guys weren't Spanish. They didn't live in Spain. Why did they go there? Why did they go to die there? There's something really beautiful about that to me. And I think we should respect them and we should remember them.
In September 1937, the 15th International Brigade laid siege to the heavily fortified town of Belchite.
We simply used the computer to mark
they
up
took
the
town in
size
6
of the
days
account.
Brutal house-to-house combat. They lost.
Thank you, regular Mole Rat Dragon, for the friend coin. Thank you so much.
Lost over 500 men. After the war, the Franco government decided not to rebuild Belchite. The ruins were left untouched to stand as a perpetual monument to red barbarism.
Way up. Hey, that's enough. Way up.
1,200 Canadians went to Spain. More than 600 of them died there. About 250 veterans of the Civil War still live all across Canada. On this day, 25 of them get together for their annual picnic in White Rock, British Columbia.
Get your arms out. Hell, you ain't no Spaniard. Oh, no,
I can't go any further. Your arms are short.
You're going the wrong way.
No, you're wrong. Get out.
My local library app seems to have everything by Hemingway, but that one, of course. Of course. That's the way it always is. I definitely recommend to track it down if you can. Really, it's an incredible book. Couldn't recommend it more. Incredibly moving. What an ending, too, goddamn. Lodane can attest to this.
Boo! Ah, you hit it all over your chin. Yeah, Johnny, I got it. Segundas! Hey, Len, come on, get your shirt wet.
I don't want the sun in the eyes, bro. Oh, Len, you can't do it, Len.
I get it leaks. Pull it away. Don't be frightened of it. Way up.
Okay.
He's like demolished. The great mayor leads us on. But on our rifles depends our freedom. No pass around, no pass around. That's it.
Silempino, silempino, silempino pa la marcia, pa la marcia. Quando venga l'aviazione, adelante battalion, silempino, silempino. We used to walk down the road and sing this song. It was a march song, you know. And then we had another song, which was a song that was dedicated to the 15th Brigade, the International Brigade in Spain. And it went something like this. Viva la 15 Brigada, trumba la lumba la lumba la. Ay Manuela, ay Manuela, ay Manuela. Luchar con italianos, moros alemanos.
Ay Manuela, ay Manuela. From Vanetti to
Very Dudes Rock video. That's right.
I forget it myself.
Wish I had that memory.
I remember all these young fellows coming from the West in their MacKennaus with their guitars, and they were told, throw away the Mackinaw and the guitars. You mustn't look like Western lumberjacks. There was one man who was very badly cross-eyed in Toronto, and used to come every day, wanted to go to Spain, wanted to go to Spain. And they said, well, you can't go, you're too conspicuous. Well, finally they gave in, and he went to Spain, and he came back. And he came up to the office. Well, I've come.
Who was he?
I don't remember his name.
Oh.
Canadians in the 1920s were full of confidence and optimism. 1 million immigrants settled in the West in the 10 years before the First World War, and it was felt that the country could accommodate millions more. These photographs, made by government agencies to attract more immigrants, were taken in the days when they were called New Canadians. They were soon to be known as Polacks, Kikes, Ruskies, Hunkies, Krauts, Bohunks. In 1929, the whole world was hit by the Great Depression. Western Canada was also hit by the Dust Bowl. Once thriving farms were abandoned, and thousands of people, unskilled in anything except farming, flooded into the cities. Unemployment insurance was non-existent, and relief was scarce.
You used to hit the local relief office, and they usually gave you a meal, one meal period, and get the hell out of town system, you know. It was a funny thing. The cops tried to keep you off the trains, but they didn't want you to get on the trains in a railway station, but they'd drive you out of town where you couldn't get them, and you were pushed from one town to the other. It was quite a thing, you know. You were never stuck for transportation.
I rode freights from town to town, from city to city, and it was by sheer luck that you got a job here and there, and it wasn't permanent, it was very temporary, because you used to get laid off, and then you get the freights and go again.
I can remember I had a real rough go. I was in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and I was sleeping on the railway, alongside the railway in a pile of ties there, and I fell off of them, and I split my ear. The ear was all blooded up in the side of my head. Of course, you just accepted these things. You didn't run to a doctor or first aid man. You didn't know what they were, but you just accepted that. And I was quite depressed. I think I felt quite sick over it. I got a good shaking, you know. And everything was going wrong for me. I was really broke. I wound up in the jungles there. I was just going to sleep, and I was doing a lot of reminiscence, you know, whether I should have stayed home, or was I better off at home, or where was all my friends? And, you know, I used to watch, you know, in these towns, the lights going out at 9, 10 o'clock at night. You know, people were going to bed in beds, and you were out in the wild blue yonder. You know, it was great at times, but it was depressing as all hell at other times, because
Sounds like it.
People like to be with people, and you want to have something to lean on. We never had that. But anyway, back to this jungle, and I was hungry as hell, and there was this, well, I knew what he was now. He's a Ukrainian. He was just new to the country. He was big and strong. I can imagine he could get a job anywhere. One look at him and they'd hire him, and he was willing to work. And he had a hunk of bread, cheese, bologna, some butter, and he was cooking up tea, and he kept looking at me, and he couldn't even speak a word English, but the fact was he offered food to me and cleaned me up a little bit. He was a pretty good guy, and, you know, from then on I had, my views changed, you know. Previous to that, you're either a Catholic or a Protestant, and there was the goddamn Swedes, you know, and the Jews, and you took out your misfortunes or the way things were. They were bad for everybody, and instead of looking for what was wrong with everything, you were attacking each other. And if it wasn't for the bloody Swedes, we'd have a job. If it wasn't for the bohunks taking all our jobs, like this big guy, he could get a job. That was a job you couldn't get. And well, you were making these excuses, but after that I found out they were just about all people in the same boat.
This is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Oh boy. Oh my goodness. They're in. They're in, folks. They're in. Oh my gosh. Welcome, Lucid Fox. Chatters, Lucid, thanks so much for the raid. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Really appreciate that. We're having a really interesting day today. As you know, we're honoring the troops today. We are honoring the troops, and I wanted to take the time today to respect and honor the troops of the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion. And that was a battalion of Canadians who, along with many other volunteers in the Spanish Civil War, between 36 and 39, volunteered to go to Spain to fight fascism in Spain prior to World War II. It's a really beautiful story. I don't think we don't talk about the Spanish Civil War a lot in terms of the war against fascism. We don't talk about the sacrifice that many of these soldiers made. And it's a really incredible story. So we're watching this film, Los Canadienses. It's from the National Film Board, and it's a documentary that came out in 1975 about this battalion, the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion, and about this really incredible, heroic thing that they did. You know, and as I was mentioning before, I don't want to get into the whole backstory of all this. You know, our governments at the time were very much aligned with fascism and did not support these troops going over there. And in fact, after this initial group of volunteers made it illegal to leave Canada to volunteer in these foreign armies, deliberately set laws against this. And the main thing that I wanted to, I'm relieved you're not celebrating Canadian troops during 1812. No, we're talking about the good troops today. You know, we're talking about the good troops today. And Aiko, I mean, that's the kind of main thing that I want to get across, is that, in my view, I think sort of the ultimate form of troop disrespect.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Jewish Chipmunk. There we go. Thanks for the tier 1 sub, Jewish Chipmunk. Hell yeah. Thank you so much. You know, we hear a lot about how much people respect the troops from these like reactionaries and these right-wing authoritarians and military fetishists, nationalists. they fetishize the troops. They love the troops. They worship the troops. And what I was saying earlier, I don't want to get into this whole spiel again, but since you just showed up, if you look at the actual facts of what our governments did in the post-war period, which was basically continue the ideological project of fascism, and committed to this really barbaric foreign policy over the last 70 years, basically installing free market global capitalism at gunpoint throughout the developing world post-World War II. Killing millions in the process, funding death squads, artificially dividing countries like Korea, overthrowing governments, stoking civil wars. It's horrific. It's horrific when you look at the reality of what our governments did post-World War II. And what I think is really disgusting, is disrespectful, is that they used the memories of the troops that did die in World War II, that did die bravely fighting against fascism, used their memories to justify continuing the very thing that they were fighting against. I think there's something really disgusting about that to me. And in terms of these groups, the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion that went and fought in the Spanish Civil War, they've basically almost been forgotten by history. We don't really talk about this at all. When we're having our annual troop respecting days. So that's what I wanted to do today, is to honor and respect those troops. Okay? So that's what we're doing. We're watching this film, Los Canadienses. Thanks for joining us. We're only 12 minutes into this thing, so here we are. We're going to continue now. And the Soviet dictatorships were good, actually.
In the same boat. Despite the fact that Alfonso XIII had abdicated in 1931 and a democratic republic had been formed, Spain was still a desperately poor country. The new government had built 9,000 schools in 2 years. It had redistributed 12 million acres of land to the landless peasants. But the reforms were too little for the
doing
left,
land reform.
And for the right, everything had gone too far.
The Spanish Republic was doing land reform. Can't do that.
The landowners, the military, and the all-powerful Catholic Church stubbornly resisted any
It's the triumvirate of fascism, isn't it?
In the Western democracies, people were looking for alternatives. For many, the capitalist system didn't work anymore. It denied them work. It robbed them of their dignity. The alternatives had to be extreme ones.
You can count on me.
People didn't
and
want
good old
solutions.
Rob to talk
They
us through
wanted
all
salvation.
Nath 1917. Thanks for the tier 1 sub. I really appreciate that. And by the way, folks, if you haven't already, join the Discord server, okay? We're always trying to grow this community. The Discord server is really, really fun and cool. I really recommend everyone join that. You're going to get notifications if I go live again, which I will be actually tomorrow. Really wonderful community there. Make sure everyone joins that.
Only the extreme left or the extreme right promised paradise on earth. Hitler could boast that Germany had no unemployment and no rioting in the streets. Mussolini made the trains of Italy run on time and talked of reviving the Roman Empire. To anti-fascists, the Soviet Union seemed to be the only bastion against Hitler. Stalin tried to project an image of a strong, unified workers' state, where instead of a depression, there was full employment. Instead of abandoned homesteads, there were happy collective farms. In place of an exploiting ruling class, the people owned everything. On his return from Moscow, American journalist...
I'm just going to say, Alana, still can't figure the movie night out. I'm just going to explain to you right now very quickly. You go into the Discord server. In the Discord server, in the different channels, there's a voice channel section. When we do the movie nights, you just go over and check out that voice channel section, and you'll see everyone hanging out in there. You see one of those channels will be filled with people. Usually it is Dan Boxes that is actually streaming the film. So when you find the person, you can just go and click in that channel. You get in there, you see who's actually doing the streaming, and there's just a little thing that you can say, click to watch the stream, and you join in there. And that's all. It's very simple. So what makes what they did even more admirable is the fact that most of them weren't military trained professional soldiers, at least as far as I'm aware. In the UK, it was the case. They're mostly union industrial workers. Yeah, it's really an amazing story, honestly. It's really an amazing story. I there's something so inspiring to me about that. You know? How many of us can say that we would do the same thing? We can say that we would do it, but when the chips are on the table, would we go to another country halfway around the world and fight and die to protect people that we don't know against fascism? You know? There's something really, really incredible about that. Because again, it's not even World War II. They're not being conscripted. There's no, there's no draft. They're not being forced to do this. They literally volunteered against the wishes of the government to go do this. Can't stress this enough. Against the wishes of the government, they went to do this. Gotta go pick up the daughter. Okay, no problem, Outrun. Take care. And it is fun, again, with the movie nights, typing commentary, doing a movie is very fun. It is true. We have a lot of fun texting and chatting while the movie's on. So just join the Discord. Join the Discord server, everyone. It's great. Let's continue.
Journalist Lincoln Steffens declared, "I've seen the future, and it works." The strong anti-fascist stand of the Soviet Union gave prestige to the communist movement. To many Canadians in the 30s, it seemed like an attractive alternative. If the Canadian government was wary of fascism, it was horrified of communism. Conservative Prime Minister R.B. Bennett saw communist conspirators behind every protest against his government's policies.
How things stay the same, too.
That 1.5 million Canadians were out of work.
It's 100 years later, and it's the same situation, isn't it? Anglosphere shit. It's 100 years later, and it's the same situation. And I don't want to turn everything into this conversation. It's another reason why I do think we should all be very encouraged by the rise of China as a global hegemon as well. To give that, it's going to be, to have that alternative. To have that alternative of a different way of life, a different social order, a different economic system. It's going to be really, really valuable, especially like we talk about, we're in 2021 now, but in 2031, it's going to be even more important. And all these same forces are starting to ally themselves again, which is incredibly fucking alarming.
But so aid in its growth and development as to secure employment for our own people and the establishment of permanent homes throughout the country.
The government's solution was
this is why they're trying to balkanize China right now, exactly.
Set up in 1932 and administered by the Army under the King's rules and regulations. They provided bunkhouses and 3 meals a day. Applicants were required to be single, homeless, unemployed, and willing to work.
Well, first of all, you received 20 cents a day. And for that, you had to work 8 hours with a pick and shovel building a highway.
They gave us old Army fatigue uniforms and boots. We just used to do everything manually. We used picks, shovels.
Pick and shovel and wheelbarrows. It was really something. To build a road that way was impossible, and any rock work was done with hand steel. There was very little done because we were all kids, and we never
get ready for more of this type of shit.
Things. We never had any intention.
The next decade.
At 20 cents a day. You know.
Workhouses.
Here he is, 21, 19, 20, 21 years old, and he's faced with a life that he has no chance at all. He's a forgotten individual, a forgotten person. And this he refused to accept.
Oh, it was a honey, absolute honey for the communists. A group of idle or under-occupied young men who had suffered the indignities of unemployment for months and months and months, all collected together. Woof, the audience had been collected for the communists.
You knew who they were because they approached you to join, I think it was the Relief Camp Workers Union. Yeah, that was it. And you joined. What else could you do? They were the only people who were willing to go along with you, and they offered you ideas which were good. You know, 40 cents an hour, man, you could almost live like a human being, you know.
In April 1935, the relief camps in British Columbia went on strike. The strikers assembled in Vancouver and stated their demands. 50 cents an hour, adequate first aid, unemployment insurance, and the...
Iko Rich, honestly, I'd rather not get into this right now. That's a whole debate. We talk about this stuff all the time on the channel. There's plenty of resources out there that I think can clarify that. I don't feel like getting into a debate about China being communist or capitalist or whatever. We talk about this endlessly over here. Let's just watch this. How about we just watch this film? How about that? And we can keep that conversation till another time.
The right to vote.
We weren't getting anywhere in Vancouver, and somebody got the brainwave we should all go to Ottawa.
Well, the Ottawa trek was an accident, primarily an accident. We had exhausted most of our facilities to continue to strike in Vancouver, but the longshoremen, they come out on strike in the midst of the whole problem. And the government of British Columbia was quite willing to see us out of town so they could handle the longshore situation. They provided the trains, the freight, which we rode on, and there was no handicap, no problem at all on getting on this seaboard, 1010 seaboard freight going right through. The men in the camps, they were quite willing to carry the question right to the Dominion government of Canada in Ottawa. Quite willing to do that.
It's always funny too when this kind of communist subversion is framed as being just nefarious, when the idea that like the conditions, the fucking brutal conditions that these folks were living under capitalism, and then communists correctly seeing that as a potential audience that would be receptive to their message of like worker solidarity, and the idea that this is somehow like nefarious and this wasn't like being done in an effort to like help people out of these conditions. It's always like it's all part of this like secret plot, though. You know, it's funny the way that that's presented, this idea. Demonizing the workers for simply negotiating a better wage. They're bribing people with housing and food, I know, and giving them the opportunity to like have solidarity with one another and use that solidarity to gain concessions. What a crazy, evil concept that is. The outside agitators. Everything would be fine without these outside agitators. And again, we're just looking at the fucking dehumanizing, horrible conditions that these folks were living in. And you can tell, I mean, this is 1975 after another couple decades of anti-communist propaganda. You can tell these guys are almost like feel weird about admitting that they were in part of that kind of stuff. But it's like they shouldn't feel bad. They were correct to be doing this, and they should be proud of this.
The trekkers were on their way to Ottawa. About the same time in Spain, one crisis followed another. Political assassinations by the left and the right became an everyday occurrence. With general strikes, separatist uprisings, and the vacillations of an increasingly powerless government, Spain was heading for total anarchy. The stage was set for the inevitable showdown.
Hold the fort, for we are coming.
On the Canadian prairies, there was another showdown. The march on Ottawa reached Regina, where it ended in violence.
Victory will come.
Oh, the Regina riot. Well, riot is not the word for the start. It was an attack by the RC.
Paddy McGilligan.
Let's put it this way. where this gentleman is standing, there was the platform on which our speaker stood, right? Down here was the fire station, police station. A big Crone truck pulled up on our starboard, on our right-hand side, another one on our left. We instinctively knew what it was. Then a whistle was blown, up went the gates of the fire station, out come the city police, and the Mounties poured in from this direction, throwing gas grenades. And the wind was against them. Some of our guys grabbed them and threw them back.
The RCMP engaging in state violence to protect capital interests? What a crazy concept that is. It's almost as if that's the entire purpose of the RCMP.
And from there on, it started out to be, well, help yourself kind of deal.
Miller, a detective, was killed. They arrested and shot about 20 or 30 of our people. We visited them in the hospital. That was the trick. That was the end of the trick. And still, you see, the remarkable thing about that, you know, they didn't break the organization. I come back to Vancouver, then Spain appears on the scene. The Spanish Civil War. I applied for a passport, and I received it, and I volunteered for Spain to go over there, yeah.
But they wear those red outfits. They wear those cute red outfits, though. What's not to like? They wear those cute red outfits. Wait a second. What the? Wait a moment. Wait a moment. Oh no. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Anyway.
There was nothing here. All you had was relief camps. We were fed up to here with them. There was no more adventure in going to a new camp. We knew all the camps. Vancouver, there was a skid road, you know. What was it, Cordova Street, you know, 15-cent restaurants, you know, the Oyster Bar and a few of them, and what the hell was that?
I'm not doing shaggy cosplay, Dr. Awesome. This is just my normal outfit. This is my regular outfit. This is just how I look. Okay? Deal with it. The Northwest Mounted Police, created by an act of Parliament in 1873, was formed to establish friendly relations with the First Nations, enforce Canadian authority, pave the way for settlers, and maintain law and order on the western frontier. Those friendly relations. They maintained friendly relations with the indigenous population. Wonderful guys. Wonderful guys. It's almost like our government is kind of like, what was it? It was the you know, the state military working in conjunction with private industry and the church in Spain. Wasn't that what the fascist government in Spain was doing? Damn, it kind of seems like there's some real strong parallels there to the foundation of our own country. It's kind of like we kind of invented fascism in a way, isn't it? When you think about it like that. When you have the private interests in these mining and logging companies and fossil fuel companies working together with the militarized agents of the state along with the Catholic Church to commit murder and genocide and theft. There's a word for that. There's a word for that, isn't there? Fascism. That's exactly why that's exactly why our government did not want the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion going to fight against fascism, because they agreed with fascism, they supported it, they wanted it to continue.
You were divorced from everything, so why not go to Spain? Why not go to Montreal? Why not go to Toronto? Why not go anywhere?
For those Canadians,
but don't they always go on adventures and be nice with Huskies? That's right. That's what they would have us believe.
Simple. Fight fascism. In reality, it was incredibly complex. There were dozens of political parties and splinter factions. The workers themselves were divided and grouped in rival trade unions. There was an attempt at unity in the Popular Front, inspired by the Communists. In the elections of February 1936, the Popular Front won a clear victory over the rightist opposition. The left was in a state of euphoria, but it was not to last.
Can't have that. As we saw in
July 18,
Nicaragua
1936,
or Cuba or in other places.
After months of plotting, right-wing army officers in Spanish Morocco rose in open revolt against the Republican government. With the help of Hitler's Luftwaffe, the highly trained legionnaires of the Spanish Army of Africa were transported to the Spanish mainland. The rebellion spread quickly to army garrisons all over Spain, supported by landowners, the Catholic clergy, and the emerging fascist organization, the Phalange. The fascists maintained that their first loyalty was not to the government, which in their opinion was betraying the country, but to Spain, to the idea of eternal Spain, to her traditions and her heroic past. They intended to rid Spain of all things alien. But the duly elected new government of the left was not about to surrender. The workers demanded to be armed. The communist deputy, known by millions as La Pasionaria, expressed the sentiments of the Republicans.
It's better to die on your feet than live on your knees. No pasarán!
They shall not pass.
Shall not pass.
2 days later, the government distributed arms to the workers.
Gotta arm those
Fighting
workers.
units were organized by the trade unions, factories, schools, political parties.
You gotta arm those workers. When you don't arm those workers, then bad things happen in these situations. As we saw in Chile, as we saw in Indonesia, many such examples of this. In 1959, RCMP was moving Inuit people all over the land by plane so that it would be populated. Out of fears of the USSR, they had a hard time because the families would make the multiple-day walk back to where they came from. Jesus Christ. It's crazy.
The government in Madrid was losing control of the anti-fascist forces. Separatists in Barcelona declared Catalonia's independence. Anarchists set up their communes. Local power came into the hands of the strongest party or trade union. Instead of fighting Franco, the leftist revolutionaries were busy seeking out the enemy within. Everybody with a necktie was suspect. People believed to have rightist sympathies, upper-class backgrounds, or clerical affiliations were shot indiscriminately. Many priests and nuns were murdered, and hundreds of churches were burned.
This documentary, I do appreciate this documentary. It is going to great lengths to do some both sides type stuff here. You know, we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of that though. But that's all I'll say about that.
After city fell to Franco's fascists, and in these cities an atmosphere of terror was created. Fascist General Mola issued his orders. Anyone who is overtly or secretly a supporter of the Popular Front must be shot.
Also, I would like to look into the details of how much about those like atrocities that were being committed by the Popular Front is fascist propaganda and how much of that is real. I don't want to say too much because I don't know the specific details myself. That's exactly why I wanted to watch this documentary. But we do know that often in these fascist societies, they will use these kinds of like false flag situations. Again, many such examples of this to justify their own violence and their own oppression. I'd be interested to hear how much of what was just mentioned about the crimes of the Popular Front the indiscriminate killing of nuns and priests and stuff like that, how much of that is true and how much of it is part of the fascist propaganda that they use to justify their own violence and their own terror. The white terror in Republican Spain was far, far greater. That's it. This film is kind of going out of the way to ensure that you can tell. I mean, it's a National Film Board film, so it's not going to be it's not. I mean, talking about our government sympathies, it's not going to be a communist sympathetic documentary. And I think in some cases it might be bending over backwards to create this kind of narrative, this kind of both sides narrative about it. There definitely were some Republican atrocities, but Franco fucked with the documentation. It's hard to tell how much. It's an interesting. I'd be interested to dig into that a little more sometime. Oh, Laura says, "Are there subtitles available?" Kind of. I'm sorry, I should have looked at that right away. There do not appear to be, unfortunately. I don't think so. It's got a quality setting, but not a subtitle setting. Sorry about that. Anyway, would be interested to dig into how much of that is true and how much of it is part of the propaganda that the Franco regime used to justify their own monstrous violence.
Leftist tendencies, loyalties to the Republic, or anyone suspected of setting fire to a church were summarily tried and executed.
And you know, there's churches burning. There's been churches burning in Canada right now, as well. I mean, long history of the Catholic Church, as this documentary itself has pointed out, of the Catholic Church working with the state and working with private interests as a central arm of fascism. So it's not really a surprise that churches were targets for anti-fascists, considering the role that they've played in laundering this. You know, we talked previously as well when we were talking about Nicaragua, the way that the Catholic Church has been used, that in the history of colonialism was used as a way to gain a colonial foothold in these nations, whether it's Nicaragua, in Vietnam. You know, the missionaries go first. They establish these footholds there, establish communities, start converting people. And then when this colonization process starts to happen, they've been spending time in there, like laying the groundwork for this. So it's really not surprising that in these anti-fascist movements, the church becomes a target. You know, not to justify the murder of innocent priests and nuns and that kind of stuff, which I don't agree with, but probably important to like really stress while they're talking about these Republican atrocities. Important to stress the role that the church has played in Spain, you know, in Canada, in Vietnam, in Central and South America, all over the world, as a way to gain this colonial
This is some
foothold.
guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada.
Oh my
I
goodness.
was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Oh my goodness. Majority Report, thank you so much for the raid. Bring it on in here. Sam Sater, what a fucking nightmare. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna get my like weird co-host to come in and start talking. Or like, remember that in the Sam Sater thing? When Crowder couldn't even be on camera. They had to get the other guy to come in there to protect him. that was really funny. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us though today, everyone. I don't want to get into the whole backstory again. Very, very brief introduction to what we're talking about. You know, we're spending time respecting the troops today. In my opinion, I think sometimes we kind of pick and choose which troops we want to respect and which ones we forget about. And I wanted to take a moment today to respect the troops of the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion. These were Canadians in Franco-era Spain, in the Spanish Civil War prior to World War II, who volunteered to travel to Spain to fight fascism. I think it's a really beautiful story. It's really heroic and inspiring. These are troops that we should absolutely be honoring and respecting and remembering. That's what we're doing today. So we're watching this film called Los Canadienses. It's available on the National Film Board of Canada. It's a documentary that came out in 1975 about this battalion and about their roles, and the role that they played in fighting fascism during the Spanish Civil War. So I'm glad you could all join us. I'm happy to have you. Jesus Christ died for our sins, and he rose from the dead after 3 days. Believe in him and repent for your sins, and he'll give you eternal life. That sounds great. I'm going to look into that. Thank you, Light Angel. I'm going to check into that really quickly, because that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Eternal life, I mean, that's huge. That sounds great. Thank you. So here's this. We're going to continue watching this movie. Again, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And if you can, please join the Discord server. Smash the follow button as well. I'm asking you 2 things, okay? Smash the follow button, and please join the Discord server so you get notified when we go live. We have a really wonderful community in the Discord server. Please join that. Smash follow button, join Discord server. We're going to continue watching this film. I smashed the follow button, now my mouse is on fire. Hell yeah, that's how we do it. That's how we want to do it.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my goodness. Netlocked. Poggers Netlocked. Gifting 5 subs. Thank you so much to Netlocked. Oh my god, the level of hype that we're getting today is just outrageous. So here we go. We're going to continue watching this film now. Again, the film is called Los Canadienses. The documentary came out in 1975 about the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion.
Cry was Arriba España, up with Spain. But the gestures and ideologies were imported.
I got a bonus at work, but I spent the past few weeks lurking in your channel while I should be working, so I need to spread the wealth. Netlocked, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Amazing.
Franco was named El Caudillo, a bad translation of Der Führer. The power of the church was reestablished. The landowners got back their land. They will become known in history as rebels, nationalists, fascists.
It's literally children there. That gesture was supposed to be aimed at like the generals and stuff, not the tiny little fascist children. That was a little. That's maybe a little too extreme, and I apologize.
Those who remain faithful to the Republic will be known as loyalists, Republicans, left-wingers, socialists, communists, Reds. A hastily reorganized Republican army, without officers and equipped with obsolete weapons, tried to halt the fascist advance. Outsiders soon joined in. Under the code name Operation Magic Fire, 16,000 crack troops of the German Condor Legion flew to the aid of the rebels. They were there ostensibly to stop communism.
And that's the main thing I was trying to hammer home here. And the idea of anti-communism. Anti-communism has motivated our whole foreign policy. It motivated our foreign policy prior to World War II, and it motivated our entire foreign policy post-World War II. Down by the Border says, I'm from Iraq and the troops killed my little brother. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that's a terrible tragedy down by the border. Just to let you know, we're not honoring and respecting those troops today, okay? We're respecting and honoring actually good troops that went and volunteered to fight fascism in Spain. The troops that killed your little brother, I don't honor them or respect them, and I don't like them. So you don't need to worry about any respect being sent their way today. Don't worry. Yeah, we had unified goals with Nazi Germany at one point. I mean, I don't want to keep endlessly relitigating this because we talk about it a lot in the stream. We've already talked about it a lot today. But this idea of anti-communism, when you understand that as just fascism, you know, it's a roundabout way of just saying fascist, anti-communist. That's motivated our whole foreign policy. Prior to World War II, we decided to fight fascism for our government, against all their better will and judgment, were kind of forced to fight fascism in World War II because Germany started actually threatening the Western powers. Immediately afterwards, they immediately pivoted right back into fighting communism, or in this case, installing fascism throughout the developing world, enforcing free market capitalism at gunpoint, murdering millions of people in the process, destabilizing millions of people. And that, to me, I think, is the ultimate form of disrespect to our World War II troops and the troops of the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion, who did indeed very bravely go fight and die against fascism. We use their memories to justify all the kinds of horrible things, such as, the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan or all the other brutal imperialist wars that we carry out today. And that, to me, I think, is disgrace, and it's the ultimate form of troop disrespect. The fact that we take this very brave sacrifice that some of these people made, and we use it to justify. We use it to install a system that they were very specifically fighting against. I think that's really disgraceful. Let's continue.
But more than anything else, as Goering said, they were there to test the young Luftwaffe. At the League of Nations, the Republic's foreign minister pleaded for aid. But instead of sending arms, France and Britain concocted a non-intervention pact with Germany, Italy, and Russia to prevent a possible world war. The Loyalists' hope was in France. Prime Minister Léon Blum was sympathetic, but under British pressure, he did nothing but close the Spanish border.
Yeah, I heard about the fascists on the march in Poland as well today.
In August 1936, amidst the despair and isolation,
fascists are on the march all over the world now, as a direct result of this foreign policy, of the post-war foreign policy. We've enabled fascism in all these countries by destroying any left-wing sentiment that we, as much as we can, as brutally and as violently as we can. We've enabled fascism to make a return. And a lot of the same conditions that were affecting people in the 20s and 30s, the 1920s and 30s, are starting to come around again. It's a different environment and a different context, but a lot of very remarkable similarities as well. Which is another reason why I think it's important to talk about the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion and the very heroic sacrifice that they made to go and fight and die in communities and countries that they didn't even live in, and volunteer to do so, in order to fight against the scourge of fascism. I think that's really beautiful.
a welcome guest appeared in Madrid, the first Soviet ambassador, Marcel Rosenberg. 2 months later, the desperately needed Soviet arms arrived.
One second.
The government paid for the arms with the entire Spanish gold reserves. With these arms, the Spanish communists became the most powerful loyalist faction. They organized the best fighting unit of the Republic and prepared for the defense of Madrid. To break the spirit of the defenders, the German Condor Legion used terror bombings for the first time in history on a civilian population. Now the war's singular ugliness and brutality were brought home to North American moviegoers.
Death from the sky rains on Madrid, rebel bombs from rebel planes. A wild panic as each flight of bombers drops its cargo of devastation. Explosives blast the city, incendiary bombs set buildings ablaze.
Check 2. Okay, folks. A little bit of a tricky situation here. Was Hemingway sus? Hemingway was not sus. No, Hemingway good. Very strong pro-Hemingway stream. And as I mentioned many times, people should read For Whom the Bell Tolls about the Spanish Civil War. for that exact reason. Folks, a little bit of a weird situation here. I just got a call from my kid's school, and he's apparently not feeling very well. So I have to go. My partner can't too, so I've got to go pick up my kid from school. It's just down the road. I'm not going to end the stream. There's another 20 minutes to go in this, longer, 30 minutes to go in this movie. If you don't mind, I'm just going to play this film. I'm going to, there's no mods either. Oh my gosh, what a disaster. What a fucking nightmare. Sinchild, do you want to be the hall monitor? Net locked. Did that work? Did that work, net locked? Form a mod Vanguard. So here's what I'm going to do. Great, thanks so much, Netlocked. Netlocked is in charge while I'm not here. I'm going to put on this movie. I'm going to go pick up my kid. I'll come back and we'll hang out for a bit longer after. So you're not allowed to leave, okay? Don't leave. Don't go anywhere. Okay? I'm going to put on the film. I'm going to come back and you're going to explain to me what we watched. So you better be paying attention because I don't want to miss it. Okay? So I'll be back in like 10 minutes. All right. Hopefully this will be fine. I'll talk to you soon.
A carnival of destruction and death. The Red Hope of Madrid, Stalin, Red Dictator of the Soviets. Communist Russian posters for Moscow is helping Madrid with armament and munitions, and help is needed. The socialist fighters putting up a desperate battle. It's bitter weather as the left-wingers reply with shell for shell. Death strikes swiftly. A bullet strike. Once more an air raid, the never-ending air raid striking down. Day after day, Madrid is bombed, a fourth of the city in ruins. Fascist General Franco threatens that he'll destroy the entire city if it continues to resist.
That's one of the reasons why I went to Spain. There were, again, people in the same boat as I was. They were just people, you know. I knew that. They were... Well, they say the workers and peasants were defending Madrid. Well, that's what I was. I was just a working stiff without a job, I guess.
I was a big patriot of the labor movement, and I thought it perhaps was my duty to go and help the Spanish people.
I think a lot of these people kind of thought that we were fighting the same enemies in a way. You know, that these people were all belonged to the same class of people, you know, the ruling class, whether it was in Spain or Germany or in Canada.
With the slogan, "Spain will be the tomb of fascism," the Comintern in Moscow organized the international brigades.
In each one of the countries, committees were set up for assistance to people who wanted to get to Spain.
These committees were formed in various parts of the country.
The communist parties in particular, in the various countries, the communist parties of the United States and Canada and Britain and Belgium, Holland, France.
In Toronto and Winnipeg and Edmonton and Regina and Vancouver.
The Communist Party was the recruiting agent of the people that went to Spain. I was recruited by the party to go.
We couldn't see our keenest and most active people drawn off to the communists. Secondly, and of course more significant, we shared their feelings that the Spanish counter-revolution was fascist, something to which we were instinctively and in principle opposed. I wrote an article in the New Commonwealth suggesting very firmly, almost as a reality, the sending of a hospital by the CCF to the Spanish government, the left wing, the Republican government. And this produced an astonishing response. Well, the most interesting, of course, was from Dr. Norman Bethune.
Dr. Norman Bethune was one of the first Canadians to reach Spain in November 1936. He set up a mobile blood transfusion unit, and with this revolutionary method, saved thousands of lives during his 8-month stay. When Dr. Bethune arrived, the fascist armies were already at the gates of Madrid. The Republican government fled to Valencia, leaving the defense of the capital to the communists. The city was not expected to withstand the assault of Franco's professional troops. A fascist victory seemed imminent. Just when everything seemed lost, a near miracle happened. Newly formed units of the 1st International Brigade marched into Madrid. Anti-fascist Germans and Italians, British riflemen, French cavalry, volunteers from Holland, Belgium, Poland took up their positions beside the Republican soldiers. They were all dedicated anti-fascists. They were led by seasoned professional soldiers. They helped to save Madrid, and they held it to the very end of the war. In the process, the international brigades became a legend, and volunteers were pouring in from all over Europe and North America.
And was interviewed by a man with a pronounced Russian accent who asked me all about my church affiliations, union affiliations, and so forth and so on.
I said, boy, I'd like to go. Well, what do you mean you'd like to go? What qualifications have you got? Well, I says, I belong to the militia here. He says, good. I think I know somebody, and I'll be getting in touch with you.
And he told me to bring my suitcase. And I met him downtown, and he took me to the bus depot and gave me a bus ticket to New York, $5.
I think I got $5. Man, that was money.
We were a poor, a raggle-taggle group. I think the fare at that time was about $80 or $90. We picked up an old broken-down suitcase in a pawn shop on 3rd Avenue in New York, and we filled it up with some few garments that we thought we would need.
And we got on the Ile-de-France, and there were about 360 more passengers, all tourists, all going to France.
Everybody on a boat somehow sensed that we were not really legitimate tourists.
Of course, when I traveled, it was already against the Canadian law. On my passport, it said that it was not valid to travel to Spain, Balearic Islands, or any other islands which were a colony of Spain, you see. But I took that chance. I figured in the long run, I didn't think that the Canadian government would mind if I went and fought against the fascist hordes, which eventually would attack the whole world. This is how we felt.
The stream was already flowing towards Spain. The French stevedores smelled us out right away, and they sensed who we were, and the first thing they did is they gave us the Red Front salute. We felt we were in a warm, friendly atmosphere. The French customs officials blinked their eyes the other way and let us through.
In Paris, we got connections with more committees of the international brigades. They really welcomed us with open hearts, you know. They collected money and they brought us champagne and they brought us food. When we went to the cafes, everybody knew that we were going to Spain.
We started out from Paris, there were quite a bunch. There was about 80 odd. And we were split up into little groups, each packing a little brown paper parcel with instructions.
Okay, comrades, you'll be going to Spain. They just closed the border tonight. You'll be going to Perpignan. People will meet you there. They'll lead you.
By this time, there was a group waiting in Perpignan, and there must have been 100 or more. So we said, well, this is where we get cheap champagne. We'll try some champagne before we die. And I'm telling you, it's powerful stuff. Oof. And we had coffee and goat's milk, and I remember that hot goat's milk and that strong coffee. It's a beautiful combination. So then gradually we sort of walked out of town, staggered in groups of 2 and 3, about 100 yards or so apart, to try not to attract attention. Of course, everybody was watching us, I suppose, from all over the place. And then at a certain point we met. So then we get the final directions there in about 4 different languages, because they come from all over the place. And then he told us what it's going to be like. He says, maybe 1, 2 tough places, he says. He says, maybe they will shoot. He says, well, you know, he says, they can't shoot all of us. We stick, and he says, we fight them. He says, and we get through, he says. Don't be scared, he says. You stick together.
So that evening, we were all given, we had to take off our shoes. We were given our regattas. I thought, what the hell, walking these things when I got good shoes? Sorry, that's how it's got to be.
No talking, no whispering, no smoking. You've got good guides. You walk, you will not talk. You'll follow one another.
I don't think the frontier guards or anything were even bothering with us, you know, because we were going over in groups of 35 up these trails, rocks falling off them. Anybody with half an eye could see there was a lot of people going in one direction, and that was Spain.
But the time you hit the top of the Pyrenees Mountains, you start thinking, can I carry through? Because, you know, you're a young person, although you felt very revolutionary at that time, but your mind is on the verge of thinking, well, am I doing the right thing? Do I belong here?
And by daybreak, all of a sudden, here I'm on Spanish soil. So we stopped, caught our breath, and those that we packed over, they managed to pick themselves up, and we all sang the International.
We were picked up on trucks on a nearby highway and taken into the fortress at Figueres. And there was this babble of voices, and this was our first contact with Spain. There was the excitement of coming into the Civil War, and it was like a Sunday afternoon picnic.
Extranjeros, foreigners, coming to help the government. Every station the train was met, and we had baskets and baskets of oranges. They were dumping the oranges through the windows. We're practically walking a sea of oranges. And buns and food and everything everywhere we went. The people were enthusiastic. We were coming to help them.
Many of us came out of almost a pacifist background and understanding, for whom guns and weapons and killing would be a very strange experience. And yet we transformed ourselves very quickly. When I went to Spain, I didn't know the difference between a screwdriver and a revolver. And yet I learned to become a proficient soldier in a relatively short period of time because of a political motivation. And it was the politics that was involved, the understanding of the great issues that motivated that struggle.
I was introduced in Spain as an organizer, and I became a political commissar on the basis of my participation in the struggles of the Canadian people during the Depression. That was it.
We had English cooperative people. We had English trade union leaders. We had French communists. We had American communists. We had socialists. We had the ragtag and bobtail of the working class. Plus, we had a tremendous number of college men. Everybody who was ideally opposed to fascism.
The 15th Brigade would be the English-speaking brigade, made up in the main of young men who came from the States, Canada, England, and Latin and South America.
I was with the Americans, you know, and one thing that impressed me, they all wore glasses, and they all wanted Lucky Strike cigarettes. They all missed their Coca-Cola, you know. Well, they weren't the same kind of people we were. They were school teachers. There was some IWW-type organizers, you know. They were real extreme radicals, you know. Let's put it this way. I don't think any of them ever slept out under the stars. You know, I think most of them would starve to death in the grocery store. You know, they relied too much on the cookhouse and stuff like that. We could tough it out a hell of a lot better. Hunk of bread, and even garlic, we'd rub the garlic on the bread. That was a feast. But remember, we were trained back in Canada for a couple of years that way. I think our people done a hell of a lot better there that way. We could survive on our own in small groups, and we did too.
I couldn't get my shoes off, and I had them in my hand and was running in my shoes, and I just got on the truck and just made it in time. And
I remember that.
As soon as we got over the bridge, they blew the bridge.
It was I gave the orders to climb on the truck. Matt was ready to punch me out for almost leaving him.
Run without my shoes.
I hope
I'm
this
back.
doesn't taste like mule.
Can you eat mule?
Oh, we used to eat
I'm
all
back,
of it.
folks.
Is that right?
Oh, sure.
I remember that as plain as anything. So do I. And I'll tell
Thanks
you
for
what,
holding things down.
I think I was the second or third. Helgi Myers was the first man that signed. Yeah. I was the second. You were the third. Charlie Saunders was the fourth. That's right. And went on.
We don't need you anymore.
We had a lot of ads.
What did I miss? What did I miss here? Thanks so much. Thanks for holding things down, Netlocked. I appreciate that. My kid is fine. He's fine. I think he just didn't feel very well. There possibly, I don't want to toss around any accusations here. I don't want to toss around any accusations. I think there may have been a little embellishment, perhaps. I think there may have been a little embellishment in this so-called sickness. We'll see. I don't know. I don't want to jump to conclusions. There may have been a slight embellishment, though. Anyway, he is home now. All good. So, what did I miss in the film? I miss anything good? We're respecting the troops. I'm happy to see most people stuck around. That's pretty. I think more people showed up when I was gone than when I was actually here. They were like, "Oh, Rob's gone. Now we can actually come and enjoy the stream." We saw Bethune. They said Americans are soft. They went there with passports that excluded Spain. Netlocked made us say the Pledge of Allegiance.
You can count on me
while you were gone.
Good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Did I miss Rob being gone? Dang.
Lysine, thanks so much for the 3 months of Tier 1. I was gone for a few minutes. I had to go pick up my kid from school. So I did the substitute teacher thing where I just let a movie play. I put Netlocked in charge. Dudes rocking for the most part, smoking, singing, making garlic bread. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Netlocked was tough but fair. That's all we ask. That's all we ask. Okay, we can continue. What do we got? Another 15 minutes or so. Here we go. I'm going to continue.
My watches and a lot of things, and I gave it all the way to the boys. Said, well, that's the last days I'll ever see you again.
Right, and you remember Charlie Saunders and you and I decided to get drunk.
Yeah.
We were sure we were going to be killed the next day.
That next day was July 6, 1937, the start of the Brunete offensive, mounted by the Republicans to relieve Madrid from artillery bombardment. 6 divisions, including 2 international brigades, fought for 2 weeks on the arid Castilian plains. The Republicans gained 2 miles on a 10-mile front, but this slender victory cost them 25,000 men. By all accounts, The Brunete offensive was a tragic blunder. The international brigades were decimated. The losses of the Lincoln and Washington battalions were so high they had to be merged into one. This is where most of the Canadians served up to that time. By the spring of 1937, many Canadians back home supported the Republican cause. The Committee to Aid Spanish Democracy brought together United Church ministers, communists, conservatives, socialists.
We got funds almost wholly from what I would call the middle-ranking intelligentsia, including a former president of the University of Toronto who put us in the top level of intelligentsia. It was a middle-class support. Came in very small donations, $5 and $10.
We have the highest percentage of volunteers next to France. with the numbers we had, that we rated battalion of our own, and with our own officers, if possible. And finally, it did come about.
On July 1st, 1937, the Canadian presence was officially recognized in Spain, and the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion was formed.
Since I was so closely associated with the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion and with the Canadians, I feel that it was one of the finest fighting outfits that existed in Spain. I think they had a sense of maturity that we were to gain later on. A very large number of Canadians came from ethnic backgrounds and who were single. I think that they had gone through harder struggles in Canada than we had gone through in the States. In a sense, I think they were different. MacKenzie Papineau Battalion first saw action
good old
in
Rob
October.
to talk you through all this. Wacko Swami, thanks for subscribing with Prime. Thanks for the Prime bucks. Hell yeah, thank you so much. It's beautiful though, isn't it? It's really, there's something really beautiful about that. Like the whole Bernie Sanders, like the catchphrase, the tagline. Would you fight for someone you don't know? Would you fight for someone you don't know? I mean, that's ultimately what socialism is about, right? It's about fighting for someone you don't know. Would you die for someone you don't know? Would you go across the world to die for someone that you don't know? You know, there's something really incredible about that. Hopefully none of us will ever be forced to make that decision. But it's really incredible that there were so many people that felt this exact way. You know? I think that's really amazing. And that is absolutely something that we should honor and respect here on Remembrance Day. I actually forgot that it was Remembrance Day. I knew it was like Veterans Day in the US. That's how disconnected I am from like Remembrance Day. We should remember these guys. We should remember the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion. And that's exactly why I don't wear a poppy. That's exactly why I don't participate in this kind of grotesque ritual every year where we wear the poppies and we honor and respect our troops. You know, the poppy, I think, represents a perversion of everything that these guys went and fought for. You know, a poppy represents the way that these people were betrayed. They were betrayed by our country. After the Spanish Civil War and then after World War II following that, everything that these guys fought for ended up being for nothing because we ended up participating in a grotesque project to install the very thing that these guys were fighting against. Install it all throughout the world. And we didn't care how many millions died in the process. And look at our immigration policy. I mean, our immigration...
You can count on me.
It's another good example.
Rob to talk you through all this.
Holy shit, Comrade Social Distancing. Thanks for 4 gifted subs from Comrade Social Distancing. Jesus. You know, I was really touched by that story, though, of the guy in the work camp where he's, outside, just living in the wilderness, encountering this, kind Ukrainian guy who shares his food with him and shares his bread with him. There was an incredible Ukrainian diaspora in Canada prior to World War II that was fundamentally left-wing, that was spreading class consciousness, spreading social solidarity. And after World War II, that was a central part of our immigration policy, was ensuring that we imported Ukrainian immigrants that were going to destroy that. And we intentionally destroyed these things. You know, I tell this anecdote a lot about how the most popular socialist newspaper prior to World War II was written in Ukrainian. You know, we had a large community that was ideologically opposed to fascism in Canada. And after World War II, as much as we talk about how we fought fascism in World War II, we intentionally destroyed that. We intentionally destroyed that domestically, and we intentionally went throughout the Third World and installed and supported these military dictatorships throughout the world, throughout the developing world, in the name of free market capitalism. And when we wear a poppy, we celebrate that. And I think that is a perversion of everything that these guys went and fought for. in the Spanish Civil War and in World War II. You want a link to the film? Okay, I'll give you the link to the film. It's available for free in the National Film Board. Find it right there. Let's just watch the end here. You got another couple minutes.
In 1937, at a small town called Fuentes de Ebro.
Yeah, and now we're building.
We come through it, but I can remember.
That's what I mean. It's like now we're building. Now our Ukrainian community in Canada is like we have monuments to fascist Ukrainian SS divisions, and our government is over in Ukraine, funding and arming the far right militias and the Azov Battalion and the Ukrainian military. That is a slap in the face to every single person that gave their life, gave their freedom fighting fascism in the 30s and 40s. It's just like spitting on their graves. It's disgusting. Speaking of National Film Board, we should watch The Final Offer sometimes about union negotiations in the 80s. That sounds great. That sounds cool. We should check that out. It's also pure theatrics in lieu of actually assisting and compensating the people they sent to war. Instead of actually materially honoring the troops, they just give them words. That's exactly right, yeah. We certainly do in our society, in Western society, pick and choose which troops we want to respect and honor, don't we? And even the troops that go and fight at the behest of this fascist ideology that invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, we even treat them like shit. We don't even honor and respect them. We still let them just fucking, commit suicide at really high rates. Let them live on the street. Empty words, baby. That's all we got. That's all we got for you.
We're going over the top now. The tanks were coming over behind the trenches from us. I nearly got run over with them as they went over the trenches. And I lost my tin hat. Well, I wouldn't worry much about that. And I can remember the way my heart was going. It was literally like a trip hammer, a tremendous speed. Bullets were coming, spinning. Ooh, boy, I'm telling you. And I know Ronnie Livich says, Jesus, he says, they were just going through your legs. He says, I could see them. He said, I don't know how the hell it was they missed you. But anyway, we got so far and we couldn't get there. We were on a rise like that. And they just...
We very seldom had any artillery support or air support. Tanks, once they said, well, you'll have tank support this time.
My great-grandfather was shot in the groin by a machine gun in World War I. On returning home, the government denied him a pension and financial and medical support, so he self-medicated with drink and morphine until he died at 29, estranged from his wife and son and miserable. That's horrible, crad babes. Jesus. I mean, that's a whole separate thing when you get into like World War I and all that stuff, and now there's this whole generation of the people that came back from that war just utterly and completely traumatized. Like now we would describe it as having post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever, but there's a whole generation that just got no help. And we're just like put back into society and told, okay, go back to your job, go back to your family. With the fucking, these people lived through literal hell. Like, it's hard to even fathom. Yeah, they would just call it shell shock. That's right. And Canadians were in the most horrific battles in World War One. It's reading about World War One is incredibly fucked up. It's absolutely barbaric stuff. And again, completely meaningless in terms of like ideology. It was all just like trench warfare at the behest of these oligarchs, which just ended up setting the stage for World War II in the end. Really horrific, though.
Here comes 3 tanks. So come time to attack, one of the tanks went.
Well, yeah, so, Alexandro, that's the thing. It's a 20-year ceasefire. And then when you understand the idea of the Cold War, really, when you dig into it, World War II didn't really end. You know? It didn't. World War II just immediately pivoted into the Cold War. And as we know, we've talked about it endlessly on the stream, was the Cold War cold for people in Central and South America or Korea or elsewhere in Southeast Asia, Vietnam? You know, for millions and millions of people throughout the world, it was not in fact cold at all. It was a hot war. It morphed into proxy conflicts and wars as well. And a lot of that Cold War was in the service of, again, enforcing this very fascist ideology at gunpoint against these developing nations that were anti-colonial in nature, that were socialistic in nature. And millions were butchered. But it was okay, remember, because they were communists. Ask the Iranians exactly how cold it was. I mean, I didn't even mention the Middle East. I mean, Iran was only one element of that. Central and South America, Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia. Not in fact cold at all. You know, the war just continued. And despite, you know, somehow finding their way to fighting on the right side of World War II, and I mean we in Canada, we in the United States, we in the West, the former colonialist countries, we were on the wrong side of that. We were on the wrong side of that conflict. And if you grew up in this society, you benefited from it as well. You benefited from in terms of, you know, the cheap products, the wealth of our societies. You know, this was taken at gunpoint. Only a couple million, though. The free market Holocaust, as Michael Parenti says. This was the Cold War. Slaughtered 2 million. I mean, we can say 2 million North Koreans. Really, it was just 2 million Koreans. 3 million Vietnamese. Over 500,000 in aerial wars over Laos and Cambodia. Over 1.5 million in Angola. Over 1 million in Mozambique. Over 500,000 in Afghanistan, which has increased now to this day. 500,000 to 1 million in Indonesia. 200,000 in East Timor. 100,000 in Nicaragua. Over 100,000 in Guatemala, including 40,000 disappeared. 700,000 in Iraq, which has also increased more to this day. 60,000 in El Salvador. 30,000 in the Dirty War of Argentina. 35,000 in Taiwan, when the Kuomintang military arrived in China, who we're now supposed to be supporting that, by the way. 20,000 in Chile, many thousands in Haiti, Panama, Grenada, Brazil, South Africa, Western Sahara, Zaire, Turkey, and dozens of other countries in what amounts to a free market world Holocaust. And the poppy whitewashes all that. You know? That's what I mean. That's what I wanted to talk about the MacKenzie Papineau Battalion today. Because what our governments did post World War II was just an absolute disgrace to this very real, brave and heroic and selfless sacrifice that these troops made in the Spanish Civil War and in World War II. We absolutely disgraced them. Our government completely disgraced them through their actions after World War II. And all these guys, you can put on a poppy and pretend that somehow makes up for that. That's this ultimate act of respect. But it's not. To me, it's just... It's spitting on the fucking... It's pissing on the graves of everyone that went and fought and died in these wars. Actually fighting fascism. We shouldn't... And that's something we... You know, it's Remembrance Day. That is something we need to remember. We should never, ever forget that.
Was promptly knocked out, another one, and the third one left, you know, no use losing the tanks. As a rule, we had a few hand grenades, and when I first went up to the front at TRRS, we each had 15 rounds of ammunition and 2 hand grenades for the whole platoon that I was in charge of at that time.
In December 1937, the Republicans launched a major attack on Teruel. For political reasons, it was an all-Spanish offensive. but later the international brigades were called in.
Yeah, there were 3 of us came out of Teruel. 3 of us came out. It was a dramatic finish after some days. Historically, I suppose you would say it was a good fight. It had the pictorial, dramatic character of being in a landscape where it could be seen from the surrounding Sierra Hills. We relieved the Austro-German brigade, which in my opinion...
And Squatcher, it's a good point as well. Anti-communism, capitalism, and Western imperialism is also currently killing our planet. The U.S. would rather have the world burn than try to fix it. That's it.